Alrighty, Madam Clerk, I see Councillor Osanik is here. Welcome, Councillor Osanik. Does that bring us to quorum?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. We do have quorum. Currently missing from the committee, from committee members are Councillor Chappelle and Councillor Hutchison. Joining us from staff are Tim Park, Director of Planning Services, James Barr, Manager of Development Approvals, Lindsay Lambert, Senior Planner, Ian Clendenning, Senior Planner, Amy Didrikson, Intermediate Planner, Ingie Kim, Planner. Blair Johnson is our meeting host this evening, and I'm Elizabeth Fawcett. I am the committee clerk for planning. We currently have 6 agents and applicants joining us this evening, and we have 12 members of the public in the gallery at this time. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
All righty, thank you so much, Ms. Fawcett. Welcome everyone to Planning Committee. Tonight we have 3 public meetings and then a quick agenda because there is no other business for the committee to deal with. So we'll jump right into our first public meeting, and I will read what's called the Notice of Collection that gives an overview of how this process works for members of the public, particularly who wish to participate. Personal information collected as a result of this public meeting and process is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning Services, who is Mr. Park, and we heard that he's with us tonight, which is excellent. The purpose of the public meeting is to present planning applications in a public forum and to give the public an opportunity to make representations in respect to the proposal as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, the meeting will be open to the public for comments and questions. Persons speaking at the meeting are required to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. Additionally, interested members of the public can email the committee clerk, Ms. Fawcett, who we just heard from, or the assigned planner if they wish to be notified regarding a particular application. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications, and that's a point I just underscore for everyone participating. Tonight is not about decision making, it's about this feedback and hearing the proposal and comments from the public. An exception to this rule, which we don't have to worry about, is combined reports. And public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. After the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a comprehensive report will be prepared making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. This committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, City Council, who has the final say on the applications. And following a council decision, notice will be circulated to the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting, like we're at tonight, or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. With that said, we have our first public meeting for 1149, 1173, and 1177 Montreal Street, and I'll have staff comment on that, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for a zoning bylaw amendment with respect to the subject site located at 1149, 1173, and 1177 Montreal Street. The lands are also subject to an active application for site plan control that is being processed concurrently. For this public meeting, notice was given in accordance with the Planning Act as detailed in the public meeting report. We have received 3 pieces of supportive correspondence for this application. 1 was included in the main agenda package and 2 were added to the addendum this morning. Additionally, we have received questions from an interested member of the public today. Planning staff are in the process of reviewing and responding back to the residents. This is a statutory public meeting held under the Planning Act, the purpose of which is for the applicant to present their proposal to the members of the public and planning committee and answer questions. As part of this public meeting, planning staff has prepared a public meeting report summarizing the proposal. It should be noted that no recommendations or decisions are being made this evening regarding this report. And finally, planning staff are in attendance this evening to record the questions being asked of the applicant and to address technical questions regarding the planning process. Feedback received will be addressed by planning staff within a future comprehensive report once technical review of the application is complete and staff are ready to make a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Very good. So we will officially call the public meeting to order, and I'll just make the comment that after the applicant has about 10 or 15 minutes to present to us, then we'll go to the public for comment and question, 5 minutes per person for about 5 people, and then we'll have the applicant actually directly respond to those comments and questions and keep doing that cycle until there are no more members of the public who wish to participate, at which time we'll go to council, or I should say committee, for questions also of the applicant. So Ms. Stuckey, we can hand it to you now.
Hi committee, my name is Emma Stuckey. I'm a planner at IBI Group and will be presenting tonight on behalf of the owner of 1177 Montreal Street. Next slide, please. So tonight we're seeking applying for a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the development of vacant lands located at 1177 Montreal Street. The proposed development includes 2 apartment buildings, 2 townhouse blocks for a total of 122 apartment units, 6 townhouse units. And we're looking to amend this existing site-specific zoning to permit the development. Next slide, please. Here's the location. It's located on the east side of Montreal Street in the Rideau Heights neighborhood. Next slide, please. To the north are primarily single detached residential uses, Sutherland Drive Park. To the east is the CN Rail main line, the Cataraqui River and Cataraqui Marsh. To the south, residential uses, primarily single detached, neighborhood commercial uses, and the CN Rail main line. And to the west is Montreal Street, various residential uses, Rideau Heights Public School, and Shannon Park. Next slide, please. The total site area is 1.5 hectares with 30 meters of frontage on Montreal Street. The site is currently vacant. It's adjacent to the CN Rail line and Cataraqui River. Below you can see an image of the site and the strip of frontage there. Next slide, please. Again, some additional site context. A view looking west towards Montreal Street, picture of the streetscape, as well as a view of the site from the river. Next slide, please. So the proposal involves 2 6-story apartment buildings and 2 townhouse blocks for a total of 122 apartment units and 6 townhouse units. The rendering here is the view from the Cataraqui River. Next slide, please. So here's the concept plan. As you can see, the site is serviced by 1 main entrance. There's 2 townhouses right at the front by Montreal Street. Lots of parking and site circulation throughout. Next slide, please. Here's a close-up of the Townhouse Concepts. The Townhouse Concepts have their own private parking area to service the townhouse units, but again, the shared driveway. And again, you'll notice lots of tree plantings proposed along the property lines to help screen. Next slide, please. Here are proposed elevations from the west and east, showing the transition. You can see transition up from the 2.5 story townhouses to the 6-story apartments, and then shaded in the proposed tree cover. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some of the design considerations that were put in place to help buffer this development and ensure it fits in with the site and context. So as you can see, there's adequate setbacks throughout from the river, from the side yards, and from adjacent single detached dwellings. The proposal involves transition to the 6-story apartments, with the 2 townhouse blocks being located closer to Montreal Street in line with the existing single detached dwellings. Adequate side yard plantings and lots of privacy plantings throughout the yards to make sure that the parking areas, new townhouses and apartment are screened from use. There's a safety berm proposed along the edge of the parking area, which is intended to help mitigate noise and provide a real physical buffer from the railway. And 30-meter setback is applied from the marsh, internal pathways and amenity area for use of the residents, as well as potential future path connections for the Kingston waterfront path plan. Next slide, please. So again, to further elaborate on some of the design considerations, heritage impacts were really considered, the use of a neutral color palette, transitioning from low to high density, and landscaping and tree planting. I'll bring your attention to the bottom graphic showing the elevation of the drawing, the cross section with the proposed trees. So this sort of shows the landscape buffer, parking, and the height of what a mature tree would grow to on the site, showing that eventually the mature trees will help buffer the view from the Cataraqui River. And again, to an example of neutral color palettes indicating the intention to sort of blend in the facade of the building with the trees and shoreline that currently exists. Next slide, please. So overall, the proposed development is consistent with the intent of the 2020 provincial policy statement. It redevelops an underutilized site in an area intended for development. It's within the urban growth boundary, officially uses land and resources, does not result in the uneconomic extension of services. There's existing water, sanitary, and transit in the area. Due to the design considerations discussed before, it's compatible with adjoining uses, and no public health and safety issues are anticipated due to the safety buffers, the landscaping, and the overall development. Next slide, please. So the site is designated residential in the official plan, and it's within a site-specific policy area number 5. So overall, a density of 85 units per net hectare is proposed, which places it into the high-density residential category. We do note again the transition from medium to high-density built form to help ensure it's compatible and fits in well with the existing development on the site. It is appropriately located for the high-density residential test, as it's on the edge of a low-density residential neighborhood. It's right on the edge of the railway and the river. It is within walking distance of parkland, such as Sutherland Drive Park and Shannon Park, as well as community facilities such as Rideau Heights Public School and various commercial uses along Montreal Street. In addition, it is within walking distance of a transit stop. Next slide, please. So currently the lands are within and adjacent to environmental protection areas in the official plan. So currently the is designated significant woodlands on the subject property and is adjacent to the Cataraqui Marsh provincially significant wetland. An environmental impact study was completed, which based on the condition of the trees in the area, recommended removal of the significant woodland designation from the property. It also included recommendations to ensure no negative impacts would result on the Cataraqui Marsh as a result of the proposed development. So this includes limiting tree removal to the development area and installing fencing. Next slide, please. So based on this, it's our professional opinion that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is compatible with adjacent uses. Adequate separation has been used to mitigate shadow impacts, as well as the transition from townhouses to apartment, meets the functional needs of site users. There's adequate parking, a rate of 1.1 spaces per unit. Ample amenity space is provided on the site, consistent with expectations for an urban environment. Helps to achieve the city's intensification targets. It is within an area serviced with transit and meets the site-specific policy number 5 criteria. So this criteria was just ensuring that technical studies were completed to confirm the extent of constraints on the site. So we did undertake those studies, like the noise study, geotechnical, environmental impact study, and appropriate building types and densities are proposed. Next slide, please. Again, it utilizes existing infrastructure. It will be connecting directly to a municipal road. No extension of services is required. The noise study was completed, and there's a safety berm to separate development from the rail line to protect public health and safety. We'll be implementing the recommendations of the EIS to be set back from the rail line, and no adverse impacts to ecological function are anticipated with the tree retention, as well as some of the fencing and other mitigation measures, and provides a visually compatible design. And again, as discussed, this is the transition from the townhouses to the apartment blocks, proposed to use a neutral color palette, so blends in with the trees and greenery. And again, lots of tree planting and landscaping proposed in the side yards and to screen from Cataraqui River in the neighborhood. So based on this, it's our opinion that the requested amendment conforms to the official plan. Next slide, please. Just like to note that the proposed development is in really close proximity to the Rideau Heights Regeneration Plan area. One of the goals of that plan is to introduce market rental and ownership housing opportunities. So this proposed development, although just outside of the area, will add market housing opportunities in proximity to the defined regeneration area, and as such will support the overall goals of this plan to help regenerate this part of the city. Next slide, please. So now to go on about zoning. So the existing zoning is a special exception, multiple family dwelling B1 6 zone, and part of the property is open space zone. So we are proposing to include the property that's 1149 Montreal Street in the special exception, multiple family dwelling zone, and modify that existing site specific zone. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning is to permit townhouses and apartment dwellings. Currently, row dwellings are the type permitted. Reduced townhouse front yard setbacks. This reduction is proposed in order to make sure the townhouses are in line with the existing street wall on Montreal Street, to keep that consistent from an urban design perspective. Increase the maximum density permitted from 69 dwelling units per hectare to 85. Reduce the number of parking spaces from 171 spaces, which is 1.4 per unit, to 135 or 1.1 per unit. Reduce parking space dimensions from 2.7 by 6 meters to 2.6 by 5.5 meters, so just a small reduction in the length. Reduce the bicycle parking space dimensions from 1.8 by 0.6 to 1.8 by 0.3 meters. Permit parking in exterior yards. This is to recognize the somewhat irregular lot fabric. It's not a typical lot. And to increase the maximum driveway width from 6 meters to 8.25 meters. And that's to sort of work with the existing frontage and ensure there's adequate space for two-way traffic. Next slide, please. So these standards are appropriate, and that the development of apartment and townhouse units supports residential intensification as well as efficient use of the land. Townhouse building, the reduced front yard setback is to ensure the townhouse building is in line with the existing single detached dwellings to help promote eyes on the street and a consistent street wall. Increase in density is supported by adequate amenity area, parking, and landscaped open space. 1.1 parking space per unit is appropriate as it's an apartment unit and it's very close within walking distance to transit, as well as active transportation facilities along Montreal Street. The reduced parking and bicycle parking dimensions have been accepted in other areas of the city for comparable developments. And the increased driveway width facilitates safe circulation and access, and overall represents an improvement over existing conditions on the site. Next slide, please. So overall, in summary, the proposed development is consistent with the PPS, conforms to the intent of the official plan, and is compatible with surrounding land uses. Next slide, please. So questions, happy to hear any questions from committee or the public.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stuckey. In under 15 minutes, which we also appreciate here. Madam Clerk, do we have members of the public who wish to participate at this point?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, we do.
Excellent. So what we'll ask for then, Madam Clerk, you tell us who it is and they can speak. And when you speak, folks, please and also state your full name and address for the minutes so we can have that recorded. And like I said off the top, we'll do 5 people at a time and then give the proponent's planner an opportunity to respond and keep cycling as needed, ending with committee and comments from the planner after that. So Ms. Fawcett, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just before we go to the members of the public, I see.
Sorry,
that Ms.
I'm going to
Lambert-
interrupt you, Madam Clerk. I apologize. Point of order from Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I see Lindsay Lambert's hand is up. Did she want to say something?
I think that would work if she's there. Yes, I see her now too. Thank you, Councillor Neal. Ms. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, just before we go to the public, I just wanted to highlight that for this application through the notice that staff have provided and the signage on the site, as well as through the public meeting report. We've indicated that we will be seeking community benefits for this application for any increase in density that's approved by council. In accordance with the Planning Act, of course, and the official plan, possible suggestions for community benefits are being sought at this public meeting. And going forward through the technical review, if members of the public have questions or would like to provide written input on community benefits, they're encouraged to contact the assigned planner myself. Thank you.
Thank you. That is important context. I appreciate you saying that. Ms. Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, for members of the public who wish to participate at this point in the meeting, we do require you to use the raise hand function in Zoom. This is located in the center of the Zoom window when you move your mouse over the screen. And we'll start, Mr. Chair, with Robert Mcinnis.
Good evening. Thanks for this opportunity. I live at 178 Sydenham Street, and I'm close to this area. This is my part of town, so I would like to express some concern about the development. One thing in particular, I'm rather concerned that we're taking down a huge number of trees, and I would like to know from the developer at some stage or other whether they're going to save any trees. I have been on the property and I realize there's some quite large trees, and the usual method of developing is to take down everything and then to replant, which of course is detrimental to biodiversity and to varieties of species and to the general good of the wildlife. So that's the first thing I would like to say. And then I would like to say that I'm rather concerned that it's on a busy road. And so any children who live on that street will either have to have some way of crossing the street if they want to go to schools, or else they will have to bicycle or walk along a very busy street to get to their schools. So I think that that should be taken into consideration. I also like to point out that this is a development which is not near very many facilities. There's no shopping in the area. There's no significant places to work. There's no hospitals. And so it strikes me that it doesn't really fit in with the city's climate leadership plan. It is, we need development which you don't need a car to go everywhere and to do everything that you do. And I know it's on a bus route, but most people will be inclined to take their cars. And I notice that the plan illustrates a vast amount of parking, open parking, which is not only ugly, but detrimental to any other creature than a human being living there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mcinnis. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I don't see any hands up currently. Perhaps we could do a final call for anyone who wishes to speak to the application on the floor. If you could please raise your hand in Zoom. And we do have another hand, Mr. Chair, for Ryan Van Dil.
Mr. Van Dale, the floor is yours.
Hi there, this is Ryan Van Dyle. I'm located at 1185 Montreal Street. So my property backs onto the proposed location. Further speaking to the biodiversity of the area and just the concern for existing trees and nature. Daily, we see many squirrels running through the property, connecting all around adjacent properties. Rabbits, groundhogs, flocks of birds, woodpeckers, quite the biodiversity. And again, just very excited that there is some proposed landscaping and tree planting, but hoping to have an understanding of if there's a buffer area of trees that are being saved or targeted areas where trees will be saved, as well as looking at what fencing options might be proposed for shielding the areas, both as a view and as security from that many properties that will be backing on and some hazards that might come from that. That's about all my questions for now.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, again, I'm not seeing any further hands, so I'm just going to do one final call for anyone who wishes to speak to the current application. If you could please raise your hand in Zoom so that we may call on you. We don't have any further hands, Mr. Chair, at this time.
All right, thank you. Ms. Stuckey, if you could give some comment in reply to Mr. McInnes and Mr. Van Dyle, that'd be excellent.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for your comments. Would just like to note again that I did complete an environmental impact assessment as well as a tree preservation plan. So the tree preservation plan identified all the trees on the site as well as their condition. So this will help inform tree removal. The EIS recommends that tree retention is that tree retention occurs, especially in the buffer area between the water and the proposed development. I will note, just in terms of the landscaping plan for the new trees and shrubs proposed, there are 177 new trees and 242 shrubs proposed as part of the landscaping, and can provide more information at the further stages in terms of the plans for tree removal and retention through the site plan application. Again, the comment about fencing, again, in a design consideration that can be looked at through the concurrent site plan process. So I've heard that one and can take it back to the owners. And then in terms of the crossing and traffic, did complete a traffic impact study, which did conclude that like the volume of cars and vehicles proposed from the development can integrate safely with the existing network. So again, we'll be waiting back from comments from city engineering to further respond to that one, but have noted that a crosswalk or something similar is requested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will pivot now to committee's questions. And before we do, I just want to say my appreciation for committee, the last few meetings, really good questions, and we've been sticking to that during public meetings. So thank you for that, and I hope we can keep it up. Councillor Neal, I see your hand. You can go first. 5 minutes, and if we need to do a second round, we will.
Thank you. I doubt that we will, for me anyway. I want to thank the people who brought up the topic of maintaining trees and biodiversity, because that's a very, very critical issue when it comes to planning. I had one question probably for our staff. I know the North Kingston secondary plan is kind of a work in progress. I'm just curious if our staff can comment on whether this fits within that kind of work in progress general aspects of the secondary plan.
See Mr. Park, and I know Ms. Lambert's here as well, so take it as you will.
Okay, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Neal, you're absolutely correct. The North Kingstown secondary plan has been a work in progress. It's sort of been on again, off again, depending on our commitments to bring forward other policies and pieces of work to committee and council. The work for the North, or sorry, not North Kingstown, yes, North Kingstown, sorry. Secondary plan is resuming again this year. However, the amount of detail on that has not been developed to such a level yet that would allow us to sort of say that this fits or not. And plus, because it has no standing and has not gone through a fulsome public process, it would be difficult to measure that against it as it is. So this application that's before us this evening is being assessed against the current official plan policies. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And so I knew it was a wishful question I was asking. I just wanted to make sure that there's nothing that jumps out at our senior staff that may mean we're setting a precedent that isn't following where we're going with the secondary plan. But I know it's a tough question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Other committee members, questions at this point for Ms. Stuckey or our or our staff? Councillor Chappell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of questions I have is, I know that we're not to look at properties like this as potentially being students. So in that case, in that frame of mind, I look at this as potentially for families, young families starting out. And I see there's very limited space for children to be playing. And I was wondering if you could take it back to the developer and perhaps the second, maybe have a parquet property, and the way the current site plan is set up, maybe the internal row of townhomes, maybe that can be exempted and there could be a parquet put there or something along that line for children in that area. I think would also be incumbent upon us to request that some of the parking also have EV chargers associated with them, maybe more in the common area for parking rather than a designated site if possible, so that there is that option for people who utilize EV charging. And then I'm also concerned about the tree canopy, and if it was any possibility to shift the I guess the I guess it would be the southwesterly apartment building, maybe a little further north, and then have a larger spot to the bottom for the roadway, and then have a larger buffering of trees towards that protected zone along the waterway. It's just a thought of positioning. I'm not a planner, so I don't know, but I'm just trying to look at the benefit of having this so close to the river and maintaining that heritage designation.
Thank you, Councillor Chappell. Ms. Stuckey?
Yes, thank you. So yes, understand comments about potentially incorporating children's play area into some of the amenity spaces, as well as including looking at options for including charging parking. And then in terms of building design, I will note that there have been sort of a couple iterations of this plan before this one in consultation with the heritage consultants. And this is where we landed here as well, but is noted and can keep that in mind for further discussion with the city as this advances.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm muted. There we go. I saw Councillor Hill, then Councillor Osanik.
I think my question might be more directed towards staff, but I noted that Ms. Lambert mentioned that one of the things that they were seeking here was input from the public around community benefits, which also might go to Councillor Chappell's question. Obviously we didn't get that tonight. So how do you proceed, now to make a determination around what the community benefits might look like?
Fair enough. Looking for a planner from city staff. There's Mr. Barr.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I just seen Ms. Lambert come on the screen, so if she has something to say in addition to what I'm about to convey, I invite her to speak up as well. This is really step one in our community benefit process lately. We have brought it up through the advertising in the public report and here tonight at the meeting to start the process. So if anybody has ideas from the public of what they would think could constitute a community benefit from this project, this is kind of the first step towards that. What we have been doing now, given our virtual format, is also hosting virtual consultation on these matters. We do have some out currently. You may have seen it recently. It's for 525, 555 Princess Street. And that's kind of the ending tide of our community benefits process. So I just want to reiterate that tonight is not the only step in the process and the only opportunity to bring forward community benefits, and that it is continuous throughout this project. And if people have questions about what could constitute a community benefit, and down the road, once we have an idea about what that amount might be, then we could have a more fulsome discussion about that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks to you both. Councillor Osanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I have several questions. Ms. Stuckar, right now it says there are apartments. Are they for sure going to stay apartments, or is there potential that they're going to turn into condos?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that they will be apartment units. There's no application for a plan of condo at this time. And again, if that were to be the intention, the plan of condo would come through the city's processing committee.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the concept plan, then where you mentioned that there's the berm going, like to help with mitigate the noise of the trains. Are those parking spaces in front of the berm? So the townhomes are closer to Montreal Street, right? And then along the berm, those are parking spaces?
Yes, yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, there's like the safety berm and then parking stalls and then the buildings to add that sort of further buffering from the train for the building.
Okay. Then I do have the same concern as Councillor Chappelle. Like, this has significant woodland overlaid, right, in the plan. I don't want to start seeing a precedent that we're in our official plan destroying all the significant woodlands designations. So if those, let me just look at the parking, the concept plan again, if maybe we could go to like a 2-tiered parking in there so that a buffer of trees, like you can see in the map that you showed, the significant woodland does run, along the western side of your property, like close to the railway tracks, which is what's going to be those parking spots. So if we could somehow, like save some of the trees, a slice of that significant woodland so that we're not destroying all of it that's part of your property on the east side of the railway tracks, that'd be the west side of the railway tracks. That would be good. I can't support something that's going to destroy some of our significant woodland. We already destroy everything in our official plan that's shown as a contributory woodland. So I don't want to now start destroying everything that has a significant woodland designation. So I just wanted to say that. How many visitor spots are in this development? Visitor parking spots?
Through you, Mr. Chair. One second, I'm just pulling up the number. So there's a total of 135 parking spaces, which results into 1.1 space per unit. So 8 are allocated to the townhouse units, and then 127 spaces are for the apartment building. I think at this time it hasn't necessarily been determined what number of that would be visitors or not, but that number would be confirmed through the site plan application.
Okay, thank you. And the parking that's supposed to be on this site is 171 spots, and you're asking for the reduction down to 135. So I think we have another letter for the application that's after this one that does a comparison to, like, for this development. What do you have a development already in Kingston that's most similar to this development?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at this time don't have a direct example, but do note that 1.1 spaces per unit is fairly typical of other sort of more, I'll say more suburban locations, and is a fairly accepted standard. Can provide some examples if staff requests through the comments to help further justify the proposed reduction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, because I've just heard a lot of bad things about the development at Counter Street and Montreal Street, the townhouse complexes in there, about the lack of parking, insufficient parking, just being really bad and tight. And I don't want this development to have the same parking woes as that development that Planning Committee approves several years ago. Let's see, for the trees, are we doing a lot of coniferous trees? I haven't taken a look at the tree study at all. Are a lot of them coniferous along the eastern portion that would go along the train line? Are a lot of them coniferous? Like evergreens?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just pulling up the proposed landscaping plan right now. So through you, Mr. Chair, and do know that this is all in the landscaping plan on Dash, but do see in terms of species, elm trees listed, as well as certain types of maple and cherry. So these are sort of the existing ones. And then in terms of the new planting, there will be sort of a range of deciduous and coniferous. Again, can provide further information. It is all in the landscaping plan submitted as part of the application.
Okay. I had a question sent to me about how big are these units? Well, what?
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair, could you repeat that?
Oh, sure. How big are the units?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just looking up the Floria. So we'll note just on my quick review of the zoning matrix. So the minimum floor areas for 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom, for 1 bedroom is 42 square meters, and for 2 bedroom is 56 square meters. So it does meet or exceed the minimum requirement in the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Are any of the units being proposed affordable housing?
Through you, Mr. Chair. At this time, it's my understanding that there isn't a specific allocation to affordable units.
Okay. Then for the townhouses, right? Do they have garages, or is it just outside parking?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the proposed townhouses are surface parking.
Surface parking, okay. And then through you, Mr. Chair, how will garbage work? Like they'll just have a common garbage area outside, like fenced off, just like in an apartment building?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The proposed apartment buildings have dedicated garbage storage, and it's my understanding that the townhouses are individual units, so may have shared garbage or garbage storage in units. And again, these details will be sort of further refined based on comments from the city's like waste management department through the site plan application.
Okay, thank you. Where's
Councilor Rosanek, sorry to interrupt. I'll give you a 30-second warning on your end for this first round for 5 minutes.
Sure. Okay. What about the snow plan? Where does the snow get stored?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a detail that would be sort of totally delineated through site plan. There are large open space areas around the parking area, so my assumption is that they will be proposed there.
Okay. And then for stormwater, I don't remember seeing that on the site plan, but it could have been there. Like a day like today, there's a lot of water dropping in people's backyards today.
So through you, Mr. Chair, stormwater management report was completed by Jocelyn Engineering. So I'm just pulling that out. This is included in the submission package.
Right.
So the drainage from the building is planned to be captured by the plumbing system and directed to a new underground stormwater management chamber located on the east side of proposed building A. So the majority of hard surface runoff areas are proposed to be collected by catch basins and directed to storm sewers. So it will discharge into a pipe that will restrict release rates from the system that discharges to the existing ditch adjacent to CN Rail.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is for when you go out to Montreal Street from this development, is there a sidewalk on that east side of Montreal Street, or is it only on the west side?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Apologies, I'm looking for pulling up the townhouse site plan again.
I do think like a pedestrian crossover is going to be necessary for the safety of everyone living there. I don't want to see a pedestrian hit by a car.
No, absolutely. So through you, Mr. Chair, currently on the plan, I do not see a like a sidewalk.
Okay, so just
but again, a detail that we can look into through site plan control.
okay.
I'll just hold you there just for the integrity of the process, but we do have the opportunity for round 2, and I'm happy to recognize you for a second round of questions if you would like more time.
Sure, thanks.
Go for it. 5 minutes.
Right now? Oh, I'm just going to wrap up. I'm just going to say I think we need a sidewalk and we need a traffic light or pedestrian crossover at the least. And even if that has to be a community benefit, then we need to keep that development safe.
Okay, I'm through you, Mr. Chair. My apologies. I'm looking at the street view for the property. So there is like an asphalt sidewalk area adjacent to the bike plan, and this would be this is in the municipal right of way, so would be like no modifications to this would result from the proposed development. And with respect to the comment about needing traffic or something similar, do note there is an existing pedestrian crosswalk at Macaulay Street, which is just to the north of the proposed entrance, and did complete the preliminary transportation plan, but we'll be looking to staff and the city's engineers for further comment on making sure the transportation integrates with the existing network.
Thanks so much to both of you. Councillor Neal, second round.
Yes, and I apologize. I promise not to have any questions. But some of the discussion reminded me of the fact that I received a letter from a constituent suggesting that any additional funds that are available through this process could be great for a park, that improvements at a park nearby. And I'm not sure where that park is situated, but if there are children at this location, I would hate for them to have to cross Montreal Street to get to Shannon Park. And it wasn't Shannon Park that he had mentioned. It was another park, and of course I can't find it on my phone now. But if there's money available to do an enhancement improvement at the local park, I believe on the east side, that would be great. I'm sorry, on the west side, that would be great. Perhaps the planner knows which park I'm talking about.
Through you, Mr. Chair, do you recall the correspondence from the constituent requesting updates to Sutherland Drive Park, which is about 300 meters north of this site and is on the east side. So would be accessible by walking or cycling for residents of the site.
Thank you. You have a better memory than I do. I appreciate it.
We'll look for other committee members who want to comment, or a question, I should say. Seeing none, Councillor Hill, could you take the chair for a second? Oh, before that happens, actually, I see Mr. Park's hand up. We can't hear you, unfortunately. You're on mute.
That's not the first time I've done that today, unfortunately. Apologies. Through you, Mr. Chair, I thought things were wrapping up, so I just wanted to make a point of clarification because my very eagle-eyed staff have informed me that, in fact, this site does not fall within the North Kingston secondary plan. It falls just north of it. So back to Councillor Neal's original question, it sort of makes everything I said non-applicable, except for the fact it's applied to the existing official plan policies. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That is a good clarification. I appreciate that. So Councillor Hill.
I take the chair and recognize you.
Great, really quick question then concerning community benefits, actually building off what Councillor Hill had asked about the process. I'm wondering, what is the mechanism which the community benefit would be calculated under, considering the policy for that is still outstanding? How do we find out what the dollars will be, let alone what it will go to?
Mr. Park.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The additional density that's being permitted on the site. So basically what the delta is between that and the permitted density as of right would form the foundation of the calculation for the value of that additional density. And then that's done through a real estate services group. And then we begin discussions with the applicant on that figure and through community consultation as to its ultimate end investment point. Thank you.
I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
All right, I return the chair to you.
Perfect. Okay, final call for committee members on this file. Seeing none, thanks. Oh, I do see one. Sorry, Councillor Stanek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just read another email and I just needed to ask Mrs. Stuck. The question is, where in your report you say that there is soft landscaped space. What does that mean? Does that just mean green grass?
Through you, Mr. Chair, lost my mouse there for a second. Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, soft landscaping would be, yeah, grass or similar, like similar landscaped areas. So that's areas that wouldn't be paved. And in this instance, I believe the landscape plan is proposing grass and soft cover for planting.
Okay, thank you. And then last question is, so the reason why we don't have a park built into this plan is because you're planting so many trees close to the railway tracks, or what answer do we give back to residents who say, how come there's no park in this plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll note that the bylaw doesn't require, it requires amenity space, not necessarily children's play space. So there is amenity space proposed, which through the site plan application can be modified to include certain elements. As well, we do note it is within 300 meters, which is within the walking distance of Sutherland Drive Park. So based on this, there's adequate landscaping and amenity space on the site, and then being in walking distance from a park. My understanding is that it wasn't, based on these factors, wasn't included in this design. But again, we can take comments back to the owner and work through it with the city through the site plan application.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Ms. Stuckey. That was very thorough. So we will adjourn this public meeting and move to our next. And I'll call to order the public meeting for the address of 5 to 7 Cataraqui Street and look to our staff to introduce that, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of subdivision, and draft plan of condominium. And I can confirm that notice was given in accordance with the Planning Act as detailed in the public meeting report. We've received 5 pieces of correspondence, which are included in the addendum package. There was 1 telephone inquiry received as well. And 3 additional pieces of correspondence were received after the addendum package was finalized. But responses will be provided by staff and details included in the comprehensive report. This is a statutory public meeting held under the Planning Act, the purpose of which is for the applicant to present their proposal to the public and planning committee and answer questions from the committee and members of the public. As part of the public meeting, planning staff has prepared a public meeting report summarizing the proposal. It should be noted that no recommendations or decisions are being made this evening regarding this report. Planning staff are in attendance to record the questions being asked of the applicant or to address technical questions regarding the planning process, and feedback received will be addressed by planning staff in the future comprehensive report once technical review of the application is complete and our staff are ready to make a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dietrichson. Excuse me, coughing at the same time doesn't work. Excuse me. So, Mr. Keene, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Sorry, I think I remuted after the clerk unmuted me. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Thank you, members of the committee, members of the public. My name is Mike Keene, and I'm a land use planner with Wellington Consultants. And I'm here this evening to present to you 3 planning applications for the property that we label as 5 to 7 Cataraqui Street. So this evening, we're talking about a zoning bylaw amendment, a draft plan of subdivision, and a draft plan of condominium. The applicant is Rose Cove Developments, Inc. And one of the owners is on the call with us this evening, which is Adam Coven. Just so that folks know who the developer is, I thought I would share that as well. Next slide, please. So this is a map on the screen of the area with the subject site located in the center of the map, or slightly off center of the map with a yellow circle. And this is a location that's within the Inner Harbor, that's close to the Cataraqui River. And the property has 3 road frontages. It has frontage on Cataraqui Street, on Orchard Street to the east, and River Street to the north. And originally, this property contained part of the lands that are the Wellington Street extension, and those lands were sold back to the city a number of years ago. So the western boundary is the unopened Wellington Street road allowance, and that would be the lands that are between the broom factory, which I think is a fairly well-known building at this point, and then there's the unopened road allowance, and then this property is next door. The area is mixed use. It contains housing. It contains many employment uses, parks, office buildings. It's quite diverse and mixed, and certainly going through a period of change as some of the undeveloped parcels are coming forward. Next slide, please. So the picture on the screen now is zooming in closer on the site now. And you can see the property outlined with the red image with the 3 street frontages that I mentioned. And for those that are familiar with this area, this was formerly a fuel storage site. And in the image, you can still see the circle from one of the last fuel tanks that would have stored fuel at this site. The site has a berm around those old fuel tanks, a clay berm that was part of emergency strategy in the event there was ever a leak. And you might also remember there's a few warehouses on the building that were primarily used for ice, the selling of ice. And right now the property is vacant. It's 1.4 hectares in size, and it has a reasonable frontage on each of the 3 streets that we've talked about: Cataraqui, Orchard, and River. Next slide, please. In terms of the official plan policy, this site is located in the residential designation, and it also has a special policy on it, which is special policy number 8, which is the Inner Harbor policy. And it's a policy that provides some direction in terms of achieving higher density residential use on the site. And that is similarly reflected in the zoning when we speak about that in a few moments. But there are the ability to increase the density above 50 units per net hectare when you're providing land back to the city for a road, for a park, or for affordable housing. So in the case of this property, some additional density is afforded to it by providing that Wellington Street extension back to the city. Next slide, please. Now, because this is a complicated application with 3 applications, there are a number of technical studies that were submitted in support of the application. There's traffic impact study, which looks at the existing road pattern. And it also looks at the fact that one of the key points of this project that we'd like to do is remove those barriers on River Street where it meets with Rideau Street. So that would open up access for this entire community that would allow access at both Cataraqui Street and River Street to Rideau Street. And if you're familiar with that area, the roads there just has concrete barriers that seal it off. There's a number of more technical reports like stormwater, sanitary, water, noise. The other one I want to draw your attention to is the environmental site assessment. Because this site was used as a fuel storage site, it is a brownfield site. We know we have soil that has to be cleaned up off the property to be able to develop this site. So part of our process is a record of site condition. That goes through a series of environmental reports. So at this point, the phase 1 report has been completed. The phase 2 report is underway and it's substantially completed. There's a lot of monitoring and testing because that's the report that forms how the record of site condition will be completed and the steps that are necessary. So that's underway on the site. Archaeology was completed on the site. And another important one to know is the heritage impact statement. The building that I'm speaking to you from, the woolen mill, is a heritage building, as is the broom factory. So a big part of our design, working with our heritage expert, was coming up with designs that would respect the adjacent heritage. No heritage on our site itself, but heritage nearby. Next slide, please. So now I'm diving in a little more into the actual development proposal. And what you see on the screen is a picture of our concept plan that outlines the townhouse development. And you'll see there's a red line dividing phase 1 and phase 2, because it's an interesting approach. It's a little different than some of the other townhouses with condo road developments, in that our first phase that we're proposing is townhouses that would abut River Street. And they would not actually be part of the condominium. They would be standard townhouse lots, standard ownership, and not be required to participate in the condominium. And then phase 2, which is a plan of subdivision overlaid with the condominium again. All of that gets developed at once because you have to build your infrastructure so that the condominium requirements and expenses are known up front before even the first unit is built. So what you see on the screen is a plan that shows 77 townhomes. There's a couple of different styles, and within those 3 styles, there's options for how those units can be laid out. We also focused on getting a number of secondary suites into the floor plan, part of our, what I would prefer to call, attainable housing strategy, because it makes ownership more affordable when those owners can also have a rental within them. There's a small parking block in the center of the condo that would, at the point we're showing, is 7 spaces, because condominium road is too narrow to park on it. So we're trying to provide some additional off-site parking in addition to the driveways and the garages. And that probably covers the overall intent. So let's move to the next slide, please. This is just something to show a bit more of how the breakdown works in terms of the different unit types. So you can see the longer townhouse rows, and you can see the 3 different colors which represent different unit types. And the units shown in yellow actually do not have garages. They're smaller units of roughly 1,400, 1,500 square feet, 3-bedroom units. So you've got quite a range here. You've got units with no garages, you've got units with secondary suites, and you have both condominium and non-condominium units that would not have to pay for that road maintenance. Next slide, please. So we've retained Kimmel and Colburn architects. They are the architects for this project. And these are some of their preliminary designs, again, working with our heritage experts to try to give a sense of how this will fit in. And the plan is a 2.5-story unit for this project. And they're actually actively working on refining what this might look like. And that will be available very soon following our receipt of technical comments from staff and comments from the public tonight. Next slide, please. I want to quickly walk you through the units just to get an understanding of how a townhouse works with a basement suite. And so what you see on the screen right now is the basement suite, which would fit in either the first or the second unit type. You can see this is a 1-bedroom plan, and you can see that there's also laundry and a storage facility. Now that laundry and storage is shared between the 2 units. So you can see the door entering by the kitchen from the stairs. That is how you enter this apartment, is they have a private door to get in. So let's go to the next slide, please. So now we're looking at the main floor, which is also showing front to back on each of the lots. And you can see, working from the bottom of the slide, how there's an uncovered porch into a common vestibule, the stairs that take you to the basement, and the door that takes you into the main unit, and then the stairs that further take you upstairs. I also want to point out on this ground floor level that there's a shed in the back corner. And part of our design, recognizing in townhouse development, and it's some of the public comments that we've received, is you need storage in these units. So in addition to the basement storage, we are planning also to have a unified shed at the back. And these might actually be pods of 4 sheds so that they're nice and compact. So think of like 4 units back to back, and then 4 people have their corner of each shed. And that just keeps the backyards consistent and uncluttered, to maximize that backyard space for things other than storage. Next slide, please. So this is the second floor of the townhouse, and this is showing the 3-bedroom option with a study. And the area that could be the study also has the potential to be a covered porch. It's overlooking the street side. And then the next slide, please. This is the third floor. So the 2.5-story piece, depending on how someone chooses to finish this, it could be unfinished space if they don't want it finished, or it could be finished as a bedroom space with another bathroom. So the choice will be up to the owner how they choose to finish that area. But the rough in will be there in the roof line. Next slide, please. Now I'm showing you that smaller unit that I referred to. This is the unit that was shown in yellow on the other plan that does not have a garage with it. And these units, we haven't designed them to include a secondary suite because they are overall a smaller unit. So we're looking at the basement with unfinished space or rec room or bedroom, and it's also got laundry. Next slide, please. So this is again the main floor, and you can see how the floor plan is consistent with that other unit I showed you, with the shed at the back corner, the deck, the front porch, ideally trees on the front yard. And you can see it's largely an open space. And next slide, please. So this is the second floor on this unit, and these would just be 2-floor units, 2-story units, and you can see it's a 3-bedroom design here. Next slide, please.
Mr. Keene, I'll just interrupt for 1 second and say about 30 seconds, if you would, that'd be excellent.
Yep, so zoning bylaw amendment is proposed. I'll just briefly note, we had a choice of how we could zone this. We chose to modify the existing B1. Next slide, please. This is just showing the overall subdivision plan, showing the 77 lots, and showing the overall density of the 55 units on the property. Next slide, please. This is the condominium block. So what you can see is that there's a single block that handles all of the condominium components, the road, the parking, the servicing, so that there's one block that all of the units share in terms of its maintenance and upkeep. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide, and I'll be happy to elaborate come question time. But we do find this is a project that offers good land use planning. It's going to allow the cleanup of a brownfield site. It's in the older part of the city, great proximity to transit routes. It is consistent with the provincial policy statement and the official plan in terms of compatible intensification for this area and efficient use of land. And it does conform with the official plan. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And we'll follow the same process, looking to the clerk if there are members of the public who wish to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, we do have a couple of hands already. So I'm just going to let everyone know if you'd like to speak during this portion of the meeting, we do require you to raise your hand in Zoom so that we may call on you. Again, that's located in the center of your screen when you move the mouse over the Zoom window. And I will note, Mr. Chair, that we still have 14 members of the public with us at this time. So we are going to start with Robert Mcinnis.
Good evening. Thank you again. I am quite pleased with this development. I want to speak a bit in favor of it because it seems to be in scale and it's very close to the downtown. So most people
Mr.
could
Mcinnis,
walk.
I'm going to interrupt you as well. Sorry, just for the record, for this as a separate file, can you state your address again, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry. 278 Sydenham Street. Sorry. Okay, so I think that it's got a lot of things going for it, and because you can easily walk to downtown, you could actually live there without a car, and so that's from an environmental point of view, that's a big plus. It looks very tight. I wonder a little bit about the size of the parking spaces where you don't have a garage, but this is the kind of development we probably need in the city in these kinds of locations. So I'm also concerned a little bit, about the fact that, again, we're taking trees down, and a lot of them are Manitoba maples, but Manitoba maples, they sequester carbon and they put out oxygen, and they have roots, and so they're useful, and we shouldn't just waste them. I also would like to know for sure that when they show on their plans that there's a tree at the front and a tree at the rear, I don't know whether that's what they propose to plant, but I think that's a good idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, next to speak is Derek Fenlon.
Hi there. My name is Derek Fenlon, excuse me, and I live at 34 Plum Street. So I've got a question for the city and a question for Mr. Keene. So it's my understanding that the Wellington Street extension was first proposed to run the property to the immediate west of this plot. So first I'll ask the city, with the extension now officially canceled, can we assume that the vacant city property to the west will become part of the K&P trail? And if so, would the developer consider connecting the street that runs west through east for better walkability, bikeability, and just helping to gain access to the rest of the city? Thank you.
Mr. Fenlon, I should just mention to you and everyone, if you have a series of questions, feel free to ask them all now, and Mr. Keene can have an opportunity to address them after a few other people have spoken. So if you do have others, great. Now is a good opportunity. If not, also thank you for your contribution. Okay, that's fine. Madam Clerk, anyone else?
Yes, next to speak is Jennifer McCluskey.
Good evening, Council and public members. My name is Jennifer McCluskey, and I live at 8 Orchard Street. I would like to begin by asking what measures will be taken to ensure the wall barrier, the berm bordering Rosen's property, and the rear yards of residential properties along Orchard Street is not damaged or removed, or will a new wall barrier be erected, and what measures will be taken to ensure the protection of the rear properties that are adjacent. As well, I just want to bring to light, when the last business vacated the property at 57 Cataraqui Street, which is approximately over 2 years ago, the owner of the property, Mr. Coven, took no measures to properly secure the land and the buildings. No buildings nor the property were securely locked. As a result, many individuals vandalized the structures and the property and began living on the property and within the buildings. Many set up camps on the property as well. Residents whose properties border the former Rosen's property was dealing with fires being set, increase in noise, such as people fighting, yelling, and people partaking in self-harm, as well as vandalism to their own property. For instance, people throwing debris over the fence, such as scrap metal from within unsecured buildings, breaking down property owners' fences, and stealing from residents on Orchard Street as well as Rideau Street. Many calls have been placed to Bylaw, police, as well as the owner of 57 Cataraqui Street. The residents have seen little action or no reaction from Mr. Coven. I share this information because in the early summer of 2021, a fire took place at 57 Cataraqui Street, and the residents of the community are still dealing with the after effects of this fire. Unfortunately, no one was injured as a result of the fire, and speculations that the fire was set by someone or somebody's living in the vacant buildings. The fire was over 8 months ago, and little has been done to clean up the property. Debris still litters the property, which is an unsightly image for our community. When it is windy, we are still experiencing black, powdery, and flaky substance landing in our yards, and on rainy days, you can still smell the soot from the fire. You can just imagine what is comprised of the matter that we are breathing and picking up on our property, exposed to children, pets, vegetation, pools, and even clothes that are hung on the line, coming from a former petroleum, crude oil, and gasoline company. No one wants this happening in their backyard, but it is, and it continues to. Nothing has been done in the last 8 months by Mr. Coven to clean up this area and remove the debris. He has publicly displayed little concern and compassion for the welfare, the well-being, and the beautification of our community. I ask, what message is Mr. Coven representing and sending to the community that he would like to build in? Our concern is what steps and measures will be enforced if this build happens to ensure the safety, cleanup, and removal of debris, protection of neighboring properties, and the health and comfort of its community members. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, next to speak is Robert Watering.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Robert Watering. I live at 356 Rideau Street, which is across Rideau Street from where the Street B, I believe, would end, and across the unused road allowance. I generally think that this is a good idea to have some development on the property. My one concern, well, I have a couple concerns, but primary concern is the number of units. 154 potential dwelling units will increase the traffic load quite a bit. I haven't had a chance to, I'm not sure if the traffic study is available that was referenced in the presentation, but the reopening of River Street, I think would ease a lot of the traffic, but still the general area is quite heavily traveled by a lot of vehicles going into downtown. Pedestrian traffic is extremely dangerous in the area along Rideau Street, with the only sidewalk being directly adjacent to the roadway, and cars going very quickly and avoiding the speed bumps by going very close to the sidewalk, sometimes even on the sidewalk in the wintertime, like frequently on the sidewalk at the bend. The intersection at Cataraqui Street and Rideau Street is extremely dangerous for pedestrians. Yeah, I've witnessed I've witnessed cars going through trees and almost into a house at the corner of Rideau and Cataraqui Street. I can only imagine that intersection will become far more dangerous with the number of vehicles that are trying to get off of the slope of Cataraqui Street onto Rideau Street at any rush hour time of the day. The other question I have with regards to one of the previous speakers was the unused road allowance. So I'm not sure if the unused road allowance has any potential plans in the works, but if it was integrated into the trail network, would Street B end up opening onto the road or the unused road allowance as a trail network? And if so, what would the interchange of River Street and Rideau Street look like? I.e., would there be a bridge there replacing the bridge that was there for quite a while? How would the trail integrate with the other end of the KMP trail at that point? And I think that's pretty much all that I had. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Madam Clerk, perhaps one more person and then we'll have Mr. respond.
Mr. Chair, we don't have any hands currently. Perhaps we could get some responses and then check back in with the public.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Mr. Keane, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to start with the size of the parking spaces that were brought up by Mr. Mcinnis. And we are proposing to reduce the visitor parking space size as part of this application to a size that the city has been approving probably for close to 10 years at this point. But in terms of the individual units, the garages are all 3 meters by 6 meters, which is a nice sized single car garage. And then the driveways are similar. Some of the driveways are 5.5 meters long as opposed to 6 meters long, but they're all 3 meters wide. So each house has the potential for the garage and the driveway space, save and except the units that don't have a garage. They have a single space in front of them. And then we have the offset extra parking, which is at the moment it's 7 extra parking spaces. The question was asked about taking the trees down. And in this case, all of the trees on this site, which there's 33 of them that qualify as a tree by their dimension at chest height. And all 33 trees do have to be removed because they're all on the berm. So the site, as I noted, because it was a fuel tank site, it has a clay berm and liner that surrounds it. And as part of the record of site condition, all of that is going to be removed. And all of the trees that have honestly just grown out of the berm over the years are going to be part of that demise. So, you know, we do have a planting plan that will be formalized as part of the draft conditions. So with a plan of subdivision, it's multi-step. You get a draft plan approval, which is really just saying we agree with the development in principle. And staff will actually implement a series of conditions and requirements that before the plan reaches final approval, all of those conditions have to be met. And tree planting will be part of that process. Mr. Fenlon asked about Wellington Street, and I'll let staff pipe in if they wish on that. All I can say about Wellington Street is that it's not part of this development. And at our Street B, we've designed it so that it could be connected if that is ever turned into parkland, if it's ever turned into a road, but it's not part of this application. Ms. McCluskey asked about the wall and the border and the berm. So I've noted already that will have to be removed as part of this application. But similarly, through the draft plan conditions, fencing will be required. So that's all going to be part of the process, and we hear your interest and concern. So I can pretty much guarantee you solid fencing along the property lines will be what happens of some kind. And I appreciate the concerns that you faced with the damage, the people living in the buildings, the fires. I can tell you the client wants this changed as much as anyone in the neighborhood. And I can tell you that while you may not feel like they've taken action, I swear to you they have. And part of the reason there are piles left over from the building that's been removed also comes back to the fact this is a brownfield. This is not a case where I can just pick up the material and take it to the dump and dispose of it. So what you'll notice when you drive by Cataraqui Street in particular is that the different materials, you know, metal, concrete, they are piled, and part of the record of site condition, those materials will get determined on where they can go and where they can be disposed of. So it's not a lack of interest in having all that removed. It's a case of process that we have to go through. So I do appreciate the concerns, and you know, Adam's on the call tonight, so he's hearing this. So we'll be chatting about if there's anything we can do in the short term. Mr. Watering asked about the number of units, and you know, you're right. We hope there could be 154 units here, but partly it won't be that high because not everybody is going to choose to have a second unit within their home. And the smaller units that we're designing don't have a second unit. So it truly is 77 units by built form in what you're seeing tonight, with the hope that we can include some of those basement units in a number of these, because it does help with housing affordability and housing attainability, both in terms of ownership and rental. Our traffic report looked at the traffic items, particularly on Rideau. And because we are, I also, I told you I'm in the woolen mill right now. I know that exit. I know it is a challenging little exit in Cataraqui, which is a big reason why we want to open up River Street. It's not, Cataraqui is not an intersection that really has much potential to change. You have buildings that are close to the street, the broom factory for one of them being a heritage building. So it's a point taken, and there's some other measures that can be taken to improve the safety of that intersection. And I believe that addresses all the questions. Mr. Watering also asked about the Wellington Street road allowance. So I'll leave it at that unless staff want to add any points about Wellington Street. Thank you.
Good segue, Mr. Keane. I think they do. Do I see a hand from staff? Oh, hi, Ms. Didrikson, after you.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, just in response to the Wellington Street, the questions about the road allowance. So I understand it was determined it wasn't required through the traffic exercise supporting the North Kingston work, and the use of those lands will be looked at as part of the North Kingston process when that starts up again, and it will be a public process that people can feed into.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone else from the public here tonight for this file?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, we'll do a final call for anyone else who wishes to speak to the present application. If you could please raise your hand in Zoom so that we may call on you. And one last call for members of the public if you wish to speak to the current application on the floor. And I'm not seeing any hands at this time, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So, committee members, Councillor Neal, you're first.
Yes, just a quick question. The plan is ambitious. It's got a lot of units, but it does look like a good plan. I had a question first about the 3-bedroom units without having. I assume that they'll have a driveway where you can park 1 or 2 cars, but they don't have garages. Is that accurate?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. So they're not, those units are just a smaller townhouse unit with an independent driveway, but no garage.
Okay. And I'm gonna, Councillor Chappelle and I usually share this topic. So I'm gonna ask about EV chargers in placing them in the garages and in any area where there's multiple parking. As you're probably aware, by 2030, it's anticipated that more than half the cars on the road will be EV or EV hybrids. And it's so much cheaper to install the chargers at construction than to put them in later. Will that be a consideration for the developer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. And even on the units that don't have a garage, the charging station can still be located at the edge of the driveway on the front of the home. So absolutely, I'm finding most developers I'm working with now are planning these stations in, whether you're talking townhouse development or apartments. It's definitely part of the everyday build right now.
That's excellent. Thank you. And I had some tree questions, but I'll defer to Councillor Osanek, who's more knowledgeable about the topic.
Very good. Councillor Osanek, would you like to ask questions? I'm going to put you on the spot because you were just mentioned. If not, that's okay.
No, I do have some questions through you, Mr. Chair. For Mr. Keene, like for the concept you were first describing with that shared basement, or like they shared the laundry room, right? Where's that done right now? Like what happens if the two neighbors don't like each other? Like, and like how does that work? Like, is this something that's like a new concept in Toronto? Like, I don't think it's currently in Kingston anywhere. Can you describe that at all?
Certainly. You know, the units that we've designed really go back to the original intent of a second suite, an accessory unit, with the thinking that you know, the owner lives on the main unit and has an income property by renting the small unit, and often it's rented to family. And so, you know, we're dealing with some efficiencies here, and that's why we have, rather than independent laundry room in each unit, we have a shared laundry facility, and then we also have shared storage, which accesses the furnace for the whole home. And so, yeah, you're right. You know, hopefully there won't be, you know, if it's always possible someone could buy one of these units or two of these units and then rent, you know, treat them as income properties overall. But that's the intent, is that, you know, to make some efficiencies and some good storage space for both units, that there will be some shared space that both of those tenants have access to.
Thanks for that clarification. I swear, I don't know. I thought it meant two townhouses together was going to have a shared thing, but yeah, okay. If it's a secondary suite, now I get it. That's no problem. Thanks for that. Right now, for the road in the subdivision, it's only 9 meters wide. Is that right? Like 9.1 meters, I think it is. And if that's true, what other subdivision do we have in Kingston that's as narrow as 9.1 meters?
Certainly, and through you again, Mr. Chair, you're correct in that measurement, and that's why it has to be a condominium road for the southmost lots, because it's not a 20-meter wide standard road. So Kingston already has two similar developments to this. So I'd like to think, here we go with the third crack, we're absolutely going to get it perfect this time. The first development that has similar 9-meter wide right-of-ways is the River Park development at the corner of Montreal and John Counter by the bridge, Newmarket Lane. That's the first development in Kingston of this nature. And, you know, I think it's fair to say we learned from that development and we moved on to development number 2, which is on Conacher Road. So near the Shoppers Drug Mart on Division Street. There's the 257 unit townhouse development there that is all on 9-meter or less roads. So as a private road, it does still have a sidewalk on one side of it. So it's still a walkable community. What you give up the most is the ability to park cars on the condominium road itself. And so there does have to be little side pocket parking lots to deal with visitors and deliveries. And so that's why we've planned one of those. So the difference in this development to those two is time. We've had the chance to learn from those developments, and that's why I actually spoke quite a bit about storage and sheds and the size of the garage. And, you know, we've learned from those, and the fact that we have a top-notch architect in the city that's actually doing the designs, we've thought about those technical issues. So it does work, and it's already proven in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, a question. Since you mentioned River Park, and when you said that the garage would be a single car garage, 3 meters by 6 meters, is that garage then larger than River Park? Do you know, like for that size, 3 meters by 6 meters, can people also have their blue box and their gray box stored in there with also their car? And then in the summertime, can they also have a bike in there? So
again, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know the length of the River Park garages. I actually don't have those plans, so I'm not exactly sure. But what I can tell you is that in a 6 meter long garage, the mid-sized SUVs and cars fit with no problem. Like to give you some samples, a Honda Civic is 4.5 meters long. A Dodge Caravan or a Ford Explorer, those kind of 7-passenger vehicles, they range from like 4.9 to 5 meters long. Where we run into the bigger vehicles, like the pickup trucks, you know, like your Ford F-150, they're about 5.3 meters long, and they can even be longer if you have a really big one. So when you take that into account, that, you know, even the family size vehicles are mostly 5 meters long, and you have that extra meter of depth, even if you have, you know, that Caravan or Ford Explorer at the end of your garage. The 3 meters wide is 10 feet wide, and most cars are 6 feet or less. So obviously you want some door swing in there as well, but there is a decent amount of room in these garages for your even larger vehicles, save and except for a pickup truck, where if you choose to drive a pickup truck, you're squeezing it everywhere you go. To really compensate for the garbage side of things, there is room. You could put it in the garage, but you got to remember that garage is likely only going to be accessed by the main tenant. So because we want these second units in, then we've actually designed some space, that common space in the basement, the storage areas where you could put bikes, you could put your garbage facilities, and, you know, you've got a decent amount of space. The storage room is a decent size where some of these things could be accommodated, and then it's easy to walk it out the front door to the street come garbage collection day. I'm sure we're not really going to regulate it, so it's going to be probably some of each of those options are what people will choose to do.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So for visitor parking, how much is it? I know that people, I suppose, too, could park maybe by Emma Martin Park, right? Any overflow, but how many visitor spots are you giving on site?
Yeah, certainly. So there's only 7. We're proposing a 7-car parking lot on the site. It's an interesting neighborhood because there is some street parking, but interestingly enough, and I don't know how many people know this, the parking lot in front of the woolen mill where the restaurant is actually a city parking lot. It's even though it's maintained by the owners of the mill, it's city parking lot. So that is also free parking that would be available to people within a block of the site. So, but I think, you know, we provided our input on that through our traffic report in terms of the right number of space. City staff are going to review that, and if it turns out that city technical review doesn't feel we have enough, deleting 1 unit would mean we'd have 15 parking spaces instead of 7. So, you know, these projects are always iterative. Of course, we don't want to lose a unit, but we have room to accommodate technical comments as they arise, for sure.
Okay, thank you. And if there's when we do have snow, right? Where does snow go? And because these are condos, it would be a condo corporation clearing the snow. Would they be in charge of hiring the contractors? Like, it looks like since the site is so tight that the snow would have to be pushed off site pretty quickly. Like, where would it be stored?
So through you, Mr. Chair, in my experience, yes, the condo corp could do a private contractor, but I believe even River Park, and I might be wrong on this, but there was a point where River Park actually used the city to clear the snow, and the city, they must have used a smaller plow, and the city plowed it. All of these, they're just like even though the road is narrow, it's no different than a street with a city townhouse. There is a front yard, so there is some on-site place to put your individual snow when the snow is plowed from the street and when you shovel your driveway. And whether they use a private contractor or the city, those snow banks would just collect on the sides of the roads as part of that process.
Okay, thank you. And my last thing is just about like a day like today, we have so much rain. Where does all that water go?
Yeah, certainly. So I think, the one advantage with these new developments is they're also modernly designed for their stormwater retention. So this will have the infiltrator system below the road rather than a classic pond, on the property. So there is stormwater storage on the development underneath the road, and that's part of the condominium road in that case. So it's the condo's responsibility to keep it running properly.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hill or Councillor Chappelle? Councillor Chappelle, go for it. No? Is that a waving no or your hands up?
Sorry, my internet's giving me such a hard time on my phone, so it's hard to get the mute button. I even struggle with that at council, Mr. Chair. Anyways, I do like the proposal. I was looking at the parking spots and I was calculating the number of units, and if there's potential that there's more than one residential property with this shared system, I would like the applicant to consider possibly a second little parkway, considering the width of the shared laneway under the condo corp. I know you don't really want to lose units, but it might be something to consider for that regard. And in that parking spot, I know you spoke of electrical charging stations, but it might be good to have in visiting spot the charging stations there as well. Overall, I do think that this is a very positive project, and I kind of like the idea of the model that you're bringing for the shared residence. So that's kind of neat, but I'm just worried about parking. Although it's close to downtown, we're still going to have issues with where do you put these cars. We're not there yet. It's a slow transition. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments again through you, Mr. Chair, and all cases that absolutely matters we're considering on whether we need more parking, and appreciate the extra comments on the charge station as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keane. And I'll give Councillor Osanik and Neal and Chappelle second round if they want it. Seeing no movement there, we will adjourn this public meeting with thanks for all who participated. And I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess. I just need to quickly go get a drink of water, etc., but only 5 minutes. So a quick 5-minute recess, and we will reconvene for our third and final public meeting. So see everyone at, let's say, 5 to 8, 7:55. Thanks. Okay, committee members, if you could rejoin us at 7:55. Hello, Councillor Rosanek. There are two of us here. Councillor Neal, very good. We'll need one more. Hello, Councillor Chappelle. Good. So we will then ask for a staff comment on 1075 Bay Ridge Drive to start our third and final public meeting.
All right. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. This is a statutory public meeting for a proposed draft plan of subdivision and associated zoning bylaw amendment for the property located at 1075 Bay Ridge Drive with city file D12-012-2021. By way of this introduction, I can confirm that notice was given in accordance with the Planning Act as detailed in the public meeting report. We received three pieces of correspondence which are attached to the addendum on tonight's agenda. This is a statutory public meeting held under the Planning Act, the purpose of which is for the applicant to present their presentation to the public and the Planning Committee and answer questions from the committee and members of the public. As outlined previously, as part of this public meeting, planning staff has prepared a public meeting report summarizing the proposal. It should be noted that no recommendations or decisions are being made this evening regarding this report. Planning staff are in attendance this evening to record the questions being asked of the applicant or to address technical questions regarding the planning process. Feedback received will be addressed by planning staff within a future comprehensive report once technical review of the application is complete and staff are ready to make a recommendation.
Very good. Thanks so much. And we'll look for a planner for the proponent. Mr. Leclerc, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Excellent. Thank you. Good evening, members of Planning Committee and everyone from the public that's here. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a planner with FO10 Planning and Design, and I'm pleased to present applications for draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment 1075 Bay Ridge Drive. This is phase 5 of the Woodhaven subdivision, and the applicant is the Tamarack Cataraqui West Corporation. Next slide, please. Our subject site this evening is located in the southeast corner of the Cataraqui West area, outlined in the yellow dash dots on this slide here. It has frontage on Cataraqui Woods Drive, approximately 200 meters, and then approximately 480 meters of frontage along Bay Ridge Drive. The total site area is in the vicinity of 12 hectares. The surrounding land uses are commercial to the west and south. There's existing residential uses to the east on the other side of Bay Ridge Drive and planned future residential uses to the north on the north side of Cataraqui Woods Drive. Next slide, please. This site is located in the Cataraqui West Master Plan area. So that's shown on this slide here. The site is outlined in the red dashed line. The Cataraqui West Master Plan was in sort of a master planning exercise undertaken by council in the late 2000s, culminating in 2008 or so. It was supported by a number of technical studies, a master servicing plan, a master drainage plan, master transportation plan, and of course a land use plan, which is what's shown here. That study identified the intended land uses throughout Cataraqui West. In this particular area, the study had identified predominantly low density residential land uses as being intended, as well as sort of a hook of medium density residentials. And you see that in the sort of along the southwest corner of the site, sort of running around, wrapping around the southern end of the site. Effectively, wherever the site abuts onto commercial uses is the master plan had intended for a medium density use. The master plan had also identified intended road connections to Bay Ridge Drive, as well as Cataraqui Woods Drive, as well as the need for a small stormwater pond and a 1 acre park, roughly centrally located in the community. It's shown here sort of abutting the lands to the west. Next slide, please. That master plan was incorporated into the official plan as the Cataraqui West secondary plan. The Cataraqui West secondary plan carried forward the policies and the intended land uses from the master plan. So in yellow, you can see that the majority of the subject area is designated for low density residential, and then the sort of orange cross hatching is the medium density designation. So those are consistent with what the master plan had shown, and the P in the white box is approximately where the park was intended to be shown. Now, when the secondary plan incorporated the direction from the master plan, but provided a little bit more teeth to it. It provides a framework in which developments can be reviewed against, particularly as mandated by the Planning Act. Zoning amendment applications and draft plans of subdivision have to conform to the official plan. There's no policy requirement per se that they have to conform to the master plan. So it gives it a little bit more teeth. It also provides a little bit more specificity as to what these specific land uses entail. So, for example, low density designation, the low density residential designation set a range of intended densities between 14 and 45 units per net hectare. It also allowed a mix of single detached, semi-detached, and row houses at a height up to 3 stories. And I'll note at this point in time, I'm going to refer to row houses and townhouses probably interchangeably. That's a subconscious thing. The two uses the terms are different, but it's the same thing. A row dwelling and a townhouse are the same use in Kingston's policy and regulatory framework. The medium density designation is substantially broader in terms of what it allows. So the intended land uses in this designation are basically any residential form that is up to 6 stories in height and achieves a density of between 25 and 75 units per net hectare. That's everything from a single detached house to a multi-unit 6-story building. So it's quite broad. And then, of course, the park is identified as an intended land use here. Next slide, please. The subject site is still zoned as it was initially when the zoning bylaw went into effect. So even though the master plan was completed, even though the official plan was updated and a secondary plan is put into effect, the zoning bylaw was not changed on the site. This is a deliberate decision, effectively requiring that a future developer would have to change the zoning on the site at the plan of subdivision stage in order to implement a proposed subdivision. So the majority of the site is still zone D for development. That really allows whatever's there at the time that the zoning went into effect. It doesn't allow any kind of change. The EPA zone here is consistent with where the Highgate Creek tributary used to be before the master plan was completed. So one of the major changes that resulted and was required as part of the master plan was the reconfiguration of the natural creeks and re-engineering of that drainage function that was being provided by the creek in a number of different ways. So a significant portion of that creek was effectively relocated or re-engineered as a large ditch draining into ponds within Cataraqui West. So the EPA designation, the EPA zone that's shown here does not correspond to a natural feature anymore. Next slide, please. So the applicant is pursuing a plan of subdivision that's shown here in accordance with the land uses and densities that are intended in the master plan and the secondary plan. A total of 261 residential units are proposed. These are predominantly townhouses. So on the slide here, I've got 3 colors. There's a very light yellow. I've got a few more than 3 colors. A very light yellow at the northwest corner. The sort of darkest orange is that light yellow is single detached dwelling. There's 1 proposed. The dark orange is townhouses, and then that lighter shade of orange is semi-detached dwellings. The green represents a few different uses that I'll speak to a little bit more in the next slide. And then on this slide, I've also got a slide just showing a typical townhouse form that's intended for this community. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide just provides a little bit more detail and a little bit more particulars on the intended subdivision. So we've got 1 single attached dwelling proposed, 14 semi-detached, and 246 row or townhouse dwellings proposed. There's 1 park block, and right in the middle of the community, more or less. That's about an acre in area. Adjacent to that adjacent to that park block is a stormwater management pond that's about 1.5 acres in area. So the central block in the middle of the screen is the park, and then the one just to the left of it, the larger one, is the stormwater pond. We also have a pedestrian connection proposed to Bay Ridge Drive across from that proposed park. And the roads that are shown here are generally consistent with what the master plan had originally intended, particularly the connections to the locations of the connections to Cataraqui Woods Drive and Bay Ridge Drive. As part of this application, a number of technical studies were also completed. Now, I mentioned earlier in this presentation that there were technical studies completed back when the master plan was undertaken. Additional studies are required as part of these sort of the phased and ongoing development within the master plan area to ensure that the technical studies, to ensure that the developments continue to comply with what that master plan had initially envisioned. So there was a noise study completed, servicing report, stormwater management report, traffic study, environmental site assessments, and a tree inventory, all as part of the submission. Those are all currently under review by staff. Next slide, please. So in order to facilitate this proposed development, the site does have to be rezoned. We're proposing two zones on the property, an OS, an open space zone in the middle that would apply to the stormwater management pond, as well as to the park. And then the balance of the subdivision would be rezoned to a site-specific or an area-specific R2 zone. This R2 zone is taken from a similar zone that was implemented through a previous phase nearby. So Woodhaven Phase 4 was developed sort of on the northwest, to the northwest of this particular property in an earlier phase. The zoning in that community is the R250 zone, and we're proposing effectively to take that zone, make some slight adjustments to it to reflect some additional standards that have been sort of become common elsewhere, and apply those. So generally speaking, we're looking at a similar lot fabric as to what's been done previously throughout Woodhaven, a 9-meter single as a minimum, 7.5 meter semi-detached lot, and a 6.1 meter row lot. Yards would be similar as well at 3 meters in the front, 2.4 for a corner lot on the exterior side. For interior lots, they would have a 0.6 meter on one side and a 1.2 meter on the other, and rear yards of 6 meters. Rear yard is one of the deviations from the R250 zone, which I believe requires a 6.75 meter. So we're asking to tweak that down to 6 meters to allow a little bit more efficiency in the configuration of the land. The site triangles, we're also proposing to reduce those for the internal streets. So not at the intersections of Bay Ridge Drive or Cataraqui Woods Drive, but for all of the local intersections, our traffic engineer reviewed, and based on the speed of traffic, based on the configuration and the design of the intersections, the road widths and so forth, they felt that 3.5 meters by 3.5 meters would provide more than sufficient sight lines to maintain safety for vehicles as well as people crossing the street. There's a few additional provisions that are not captured here that are just a little bit more technical. These are reflected in detail in both my report and the staff report that accompanied this application or the public meeting this evening. Next slide, please. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll just conclude by indicating that we've reviewed this plan and the proposed zoning against the provincial policy statement, and we find that it's consistent. It implements and is in general conformity with the master plan and in conformity with the official plan and secondary plan. It is our opinion that this represents good land use planning. And with that, I welcome any questions from the committee and from the public.
Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I will just note that we do still have 10 members of the public joining us this evening. And I will remind members of the public, if they wish to speak, to please raise their hand in Zoom. Again, this is located in the center of your screen when the mouse moves over the window. And Mr. Chair, we will start with Martha Cochran.
Oh, it seems like we have some odd feedback. Ms. Cochran, do you want to try again? I'm not sure if it's the mic problem or what's happening, but we will just mute her, Madam Clerk, if you could, and move to the next member of the public and maybe circle back at the end if we want to try that member of the public again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no other hands currently at this time. So again, I'll just ask members of the public if they wish to speak at this time, if they could please raise their hand in Zoom. I'm not seeing any other hands, Mr. Chair. Perhaps Ms. Cochran has
We could try one more time. In worst case scenario, there's the option of submitting official correspondence to yourself or the lead planner, the head planner, I should say. So Ms. Cochran, could you try one more time, please? Okay, unfortunately, it seems like there's a microphone problem. So we'll invite you to email efawcett@cityofkingston.ca or tpark@cityofkingston.ca if you have comments you'd like to share on this file.
Mr. Chair, just to let you know as well, there was a piece of correspondence from Ms. Cochran on the addendum as well.
Oh, perfect. Yes, I missed reading her name there, but I did see the addendum, and thanks for pointing that out. So that's good to know. Looking to members of committee for question or, well, let's leave it at questions for now. Councillor Chappell, District Councillor, after you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions. Some of them actually will be related to staff. I'm looking at some of the correspondence as well, and I note that the sound assessment did not consider the commercial operation on Princess Street neighboring the property. And I bring this up to question because I had a very interesting situation with the property on Midland Avenue that has the gas station. We're looking to put an apartment building and some townhomes there. And there was one truck that delivers 1 day a week for the country time. And the noise pollution study that had to be completed for that 1 point source of noise 1 day a week was much more robust than what I've seen in this proposal. And I'm wondering why it's so weak compared to that particular proposal that I know they're a firm from outside of Kingston, but it should not have, we should have the same robustness because this is a 24-hour access point with large vehicles, buses and transport trucks, moving vehicles. And there are people who have to, so I'll leave it at that. So I'd like to understand the issue of the noise for one, if staff can respond to that.
For a hand
I can move on
up
to
our city staff. Well, I see Mr. Park popping up. Go for it, Mr. Park.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the parameters for any noise studies are set by the city's noise bylaw, and the study that needs to be submitted has to show that the noise requirements meet the, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but I think it's the NPZ 300 standards. And our engineering division reviews that to make sure that the study that is submitted meets those requirements. It's a standard that's set by the industry. So at this time, they submitted the study. Engineering is still reviewing it. So there's nothing further I can really add at this time. And I'd be hesitant to answer about differing standards for the two examples you gave, because it's certainly outside of my my technical field. Thank you.
Mr. Park, thank you. I just flag it because I do think it's an issue that needs to be addressed. The second item that I have is the idea of reducing the frontages on the lots and compressing so many townhomes in this subdivision. It even seems to be less than what's currently in existence in Woodhaven properties like Horizon Drive at Jennifer Court. And I will tell you that those developments under the Woodhaven are nothing but nightmares from a city councilor's perspective to receive complaints about people parking, no places for trucks, can't put a boat with a trailer, you can't have a trailer, there's no parking at all. And I would definitely ask the proponent for this to look at building a community for residents to enjoy and not have to worry about having a service vehicle to come and address a furnace and be stuck on the street and blocking traffic. It's a parking nightmare. And if the proponent would live in such a subdivision, they would realize that, but I don't think they do. So my concern is either you reduce the number of buildings put in and put in side parking spots along the development, or it's not a development I can support. The density is just
So,
too
Counselor,
much.
we don't have a recommendation on this file. I take your point, and I think I hear your question being, will these side parkings be put in? Is that fair?
Sure, that's a fair question to ask, Mr. Chair. It's just that when we compress so many buildings we have problems. And the second question, are these townhomes eligible? This would also go to staff, to have a secondary dwelling suite, because I do have some residential units on Woodhaven Drive that have a duplex type situation, and there's no parking for those vehicles.
Okay, so I think it's in order to have Mr. Leclerc respond, and then if city staff would like to offer comment from the city's perspective, that's welcome too.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So parking was something that we did look at closely in this proposal. I'll start with a lot frontage question, which I believe was implied, just regarding whether the frontages that are proposed in this development are different relative to others in Woodhaven. They're not. 6.1 meters is the standard townhouse, sort of the standard width for an interior townhouse that's been built throughout Woodhaven. 7.5 meters is the standard that's been built for semi-detached, and 9 has been the minimum for singles. So those are in line with what's been built previously. We looked at a couple of different things. So each unit in each property in this subdivision is going to have 2 parking spaces. They'll have 1 parking space in the garage. They'll have 1 in the driveway. I suspect that lots are sort of pie-shaped lots around the bends may have room for maybe 1 additional space. But recognizing that there isn't a whole lot of opportunity for on-street parking, we did have our traffic engineer do a detailed assessment of where vehicles could park, kind of assessing that against the projected needs in terms of parking for this entire development, for the entire subdivision. So what they looked at was they sort of did the analysis and found that, with 261 units, there's 522 parking spaces proposed on the individual lots, and there's another 995 available on street throughout the subdivision, with quite a few of those being on the sort of street frontage surrounding the park, where there wouldn't be driveways sort of interfering with the street furniture and the street traffic. So opportunities would be limited, certainly, in the winter for overnight parking and so forth. But there is space on the street for guest parking, for drop-offs and for deliveries and things like that. The traffic study sort of did an assumption, sort of I'm going to call it a worst case scenario. They assumed that the parking need would be based on there being a second residential unit in every single unit, which the zoning would theoretically allow, but certainly the market condition that's very unlikely to ever happen. But the zoning would allow 1 second residential unit in each property. And the traffic study found that the projected demand would be satisfied and addressed by the conditions that are there. I'll note as well that there's a plan for transit. The consultation for the Woodhaven, the Cataraqui Woods Drive transit route is open right now. So that particular component is underway. It's a concern that we are working through with staff as well through the technical review. It was raised early in the process, and we're trying to find a solution for it. But of course, we're trying to balance that against not wanting to oversupply parking and really encourage those alternative forms of transportation that the city is investing in at this time.
Well, Mr. Leclerc, when you come back to council with this, I would advise you to take the different phases of the Woodhaven and do a study of what the current impacts are of this planning that you currently have in place, because I'm going to tell you, the residents don't like it. It's dangerous. We just had a fatality of a young child because of inappropriate sight lines, and now you're asking for reduced sight lines and increased parking problems. So from a public safety perspective, this is poor planning without the amount of parking that is required for this type of proposal. And the thought that you could actually have secondary dwelling units in these buildings scares the bejesus out of me, because I don't think that's appropriate. I would like to have family residents feel safe and not overly compressed, so that we're not on top of each other.
so I'm disappointed that this proposal is so squeezed in like this.
Okay,
And that's
Councillor, I again totally hear you and very sensitive, especially to your residents. But I would like staff to comment on that in terms of parking safety, because we have parking policies and the planners articulated what he needs to at this point. Perhaps Mr. Park or the planner on file could respond to Councillor Chappelle's questions about parking safety.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have discussed that internally with transportation services. Now, while they do identify parking services, transportation services does highlight that they have met the requirements for on-site parking, being the 2 standard parking stalls per unit, and provided, as I recall, 95 stalls that they've identified are capable of being on-site. I asked them specifically to identify whether they have concerns based on the location of how that's laid out. And the narrative that I was given in a response to that direct inquiry was that that does actually force vehicles to slow down. So I think that it was a little bit of a nuanced response, at least in that regard, that by having vehicles parked on the street, that does have the effect of slowing traffic down, was their opinion. Of course, yeah, you do raise, this committee does raise excellent points about safety, and that's always a concern of staff.
Thank you. Councillor Chappelle, you have 30 seconds left for this first round. Are there other questions you have at this point?
I'd just like to thank the recipients of my passionate plea that, make more family-oriented positions rather than just for profit. Just lighten it up a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chappelle. Councillor Osanek, after you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. A question for Mr. Leclerc. Did I miss how many visitor parking spots? Like where's visitors supposed to park? Visitors and tradespeople, cleaning your furnace, that sort of thing.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I didn't cover it in my presentation, but I do have a slide that illustrates it. If the clerk maybe bring up my presentation and switch to slide 11, I do have it visually here. This is taken from the traffic study. Effectively, what this is doing is it's identifying the locations on the streets where vehicles could realistically park. So on the left of your screen is the northern half or so of the development, and then this on the right hand side is the southern half.
Okay, and then how wide is the street?
So this is a typical, through you, Mr. Chair, this is a typical 20-meter wide road allowance that would have room for 2 vehicles to pass, as well as vehicles to park on the side.
Okay, so it's as wide as a regular neighborhood? Like, is it as wide as all the other streets being built right now in Woodhaven?
That's correct. I don't believe there are any 18-meter road allowances in Woodhaven. That's a standard that we're starting to see in some other communities. There's one in West Village, for example, just behind the RioCan Center, but there aren't any 18 meters here. These are all 20.
These are all 20. Okay. And then so that's standard in a subdivision, like in older subdivisions too? Like when you just said what we're starting to see, is that because they used to be wider and now 20 is the standard? No, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. 20 meters is the standard road allowance width and has been for quite a while. I'm not going to throw a year out there, but that's been the standard dimension for a long time. There's a push just generally in planning to reduce road allowance widths to 18 or narrower. In Ottawa, you'll commonly see roads at the 16 to 18 meter width. Now the 20 meter width is the standard that you see on local roads. You do see wider roads. Cataraqui Woods Drive, for example, is substantially wider because it is a higher order collector road, as is Bay Ridge Drive.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Thank you. I know that like a bus is going to be going through Woodhaven right now. They're doing public consultation on right? We want people to be able to take bus and not have a car or reduce to one car. But the problem with the West End and Woodhaven in particular is that there's no commercial area, right? Like for the Woodhaven master secondary plan back in 2005, there used to be a commercial area right in the heart of Woodhaven. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that commercial area was taken out so that it could be housing instead. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it wasn't taken out, it was relocated. It was moved from I believe it's actually been moved twice. So it was, I believe, at the southwest corner of Holden and Cataraqui Woods Drive, and then it was switched over to the other corner and then moved to the north. But to the councillor's point, there is a policy in the official plan that indicates that after a certain number of units are built or after a certain amount of time, that commercial can be developed as residential. So there is that particular commercial block may not be developed as a commercial use. I can say from working with the owner of the lands and the developer that there is interest in providing a more substantial commercial use in this area, but there's not any detail that we can provide at this time on that, just that it's being explored.
Yeah, so thanks for going through that history. So basically it's like each phase is like, we'll push it to the next phase. Now it's off our property. Hey, our property's here. It's all houses, right? We'll push it to the next phase. It's like not our property. And now it's like supposed to be to the north in a future phase. Who knows what happens? It proves the point that it's still, Woodhaven is centric. It's just like a lot of the neighborhoods in the West End, and people need a car. Even with the bus, you need a car to go grocery shopping. And yeah, when you have so many cars side by side, I didn't count on page 11 of the traffic plan you just showed. I didn't count all those red lines in there to how many parking spots that might be. But yeah, it's going to be tight. And basically, I shared the same concerns then as we just heard Councillor Chappelle say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wonder, maybe I missed it. I was a bit distracted earlier on, Mr. Leclerc, but do you have any visual renderings of what the units will look like?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've got one. Find the right slide.
The reason I'm asking this is because I am sympathetic to what Councillor Chappelle is saying, and normally I think when we get something like this, we get some visual sense of what the neighborhood will look like, and I don't see anything. I didn't see anything like that here.
So through you, Mr. Chair, there is a rendering on slide 6 just showing the typical townhouse format. The specific townhouse units that are intended in this community haven't been selected. The two builders that will be building, the Tamarack and Caraco, offer a variety of unit types, and the specific unit types won't be selected until more or less the time of sale.
So the until the time of sale. So
yeah,
are you saying that the purchasers are going to be able to choose their model?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the builders will offer a certain number of model types for different lot sizes. So they might have 2 townhouse models, 2 single attached models, 2 semi-detached models that they would offer to prospective purchasers. Now that varies depending on the number of models for each lot size. Some builders don't offer a whole lot of variety for specific lot sizes, but there are a few different models of townhouses that each builder offers.
So I'm just, I'm thinking in terms of presentations like this public, because there's only going to be this one and then the comprehensive. So for the public to be able to ask, suitable questions, I kind of think that rendering is important part of the presentation. But that's, maybe that's a question for staff, because is that not normally something that we would see at this public meeting?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we can always, if the clerk would like to bring up slide 6 of my presentation, we can show the slide with the rendering. It wasn't a full slide of the whole community, but this is an indication of the type of townhouse that you would see here.
With shorter driveways, so presumably, right?
With a 6-meter driveway length, that's right.
Yeah.
6 meters from the driveway to the property line, and then whatever distance from the property line to the actual traveled portion. But to the councillor's point, they would be shorter than as shown in this rendering.
Okay, Thank you.
Alrighty, I don't see Councillor Neal's hand, so I'm going to ask Councillor Hill to take the chair so I can ask 2 questions.
I take the chair and I recognize you.
Thanks very much. I actually wanted to pick up on a lot of the themes that have been discussed. I'm very happy with density generally, but I'm wondering, why does this proposal have almost exclusively townhouses, especially in relation to one that we saw at our last planning meeting that had almost exclusive single family homes? Recognizing, of course, you showed the yellow, was it 6, 10, maybe 15 lots at the most of single family homes. I don't get why there isn't more mix. Can you explain that, please?
Agree, Mr. Chair. That is in part why this particular subdivision is being proposed as entirely towns. The earlier phases of Woodhaven that I spoke to through a previous public meeting a few weeks ago were primarily that particular sort of strip of subdivision was predominantly single attached. So the lots that were planned and draft approved at that time were largely single attached. Back when I think that plan was draft approved in, I want to say 2000 and early 2010s, I would say. I don't have that number in front of me as I did at that public meeting. So because of the large number of single attached dwellings in those earlier phases, there's a substantial demand and a substantial growth in the demand for townhouse dwellings that we're seeing, that the home builders are seeing right now in the market. And there's a realization that there's a need for more townhouse dwellings, and there just aren't that many townhouse lots that are ready to be developed in the city of Kingston. There's some in West Village, there's some in Riverview, there's a few other sort of subdivision areas where townhouses are being proposed. So this is an effort to really increase the supply of townhouse units in the city.
Okay. I appreciate the market demand, but it doesn't actually answer the question, why are they just located together? Why, if that is true, why weren't they mixed in with the previous iterations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the market demands changed substantially over time. I think if we were seeing the demand for townhouses that we're seeing now, rather we being the home builders in this case, if they were seeing the demand now for townhouses that they were seeing then, there would have been a more even split at the time. At that time, there was a significantly more demand for singles. So that's why that particular phase was brought online where those particular phases were being brought online with predominantly singles. Phases that have happened in between, the Woodhaven phase 3, Woodhaven phase 4, have seen a much more even mix of singles and towns. But what's happened right now is that there's such a low supply of townhouses that the builders are trying to meet that need through this phase by bringing online a lot more townhouses in this area. If there were an opportunity to sort of balance the supply in this particular phase by having a mix of singles and semis, singles and towns, say more singles and towns, they would be seeking that. But they are seeking predominantly towns because there's such a need for it.
Okay, I'm just going to press this a touch further because it's an interesting line around need and market demand. What type of data can you back that up with?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I communicate what I understand from the home builders. So the home builders ask for and pursue a certain type of lot that the developer is tasked with bringing online through the development process. So the exercise that we're pursuing right now is to determine whether that is appropriate and consistent with the provincial policy statement and the official plan through this development application. So making sure that obviously functional needs are met and so forth. So the demand, the impetus for the number of lots and the size and the nature of the lots in the community is in this case being driven largely by the market, as it often is in development proposals. And then the evaluation that we're undertaking is to determine whether that's appropriate at this location.
Yeah, that's fair. I want to recognize our limitations here. So my second question, or line of questioning at least, is for staff, and it's pretty much what Councillor Osanek had asked, but I'm wondering if city staff could talk about the lack of mixed use in these proposals, this one particularly, seeing nothing but residential for the large number of units contemplated, especially with second residential units potentially applicable here as well. How come we're not seeing more commercial mix in this proposal?
Mr. Clendenning?
Yeah, thank you. And once again, through the chair, that is some of the comments we wish to bring back, is highlighting how both the official plan generally and the Cataraqui West secondary plan more specifically does speak to a mix of land uses for a variety of reasons. It speaks to high density to allow and encourage transportation, the affordability issue. So yeah, I think that generally speaking, the official plan is looking for a mix. This development, at least this one subdivision being proposed, as I recall, is somewhere to the effect of 94% the row houses, there being one single detached, and then the I think 14 semi-detached. So that is something that we're going to be feeding back to the applicant, and you know, I together with all the other comments received through tonight's public meeting.
Okay, fair enough. I'll leave it there, actually. Thanks.
I return the chair.
Perfect. And I'll recognize Councillor Hill, then Osanik for a second round of questions.
And I just want to actually pursue that line of questioning because, you know, we're hearing more from typically in Toronto and Vancouver, where they're looking at incorporating more mix of you know, low-rise apartment buildings, buildings like yours, you know, giving us tonight, and single-use residential. So, you know, all mixed together. But what we're going to end up with here is, you know, 7 or 8 different pockets of distinctly different kinds of construction, and some of which are going to bring kind of unique problems, you know, into that area, as Councillor Chappelle expressed some concern about. So, like, is there some thought to, and I don't know if this is for staff or for you, Mr. Leclerc, but is there some thought to how we kind of broaden, like Councillor Kiley said, is there, you know, the mixed use residential inside of these blocks, so that we don't end up with, you know, such distinctive neighborhood blocks that are completely dissimilar one to the other. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that question. Those conversations are happening, and they're happening at a sort of both a localized scale and a broader scale. In this particular subdivision, I think the predominant effect that you're seeing out of that is that the townhouse blocks proposed along the sort of in the southern portion of this phase, particularly in the sort of medium density designated area, are longer townhouse blocks. They're the sort of the 5, I believe they go up to 5 units in a row, whereas there's a higher concentration of semis and, you know, 4 and 3 unit townhouse blocks further north. So it's a gradation on this particular form, rather than an overall shift in the variety. Obviously, there aren't any proposed low-rise apartment buildings, but that's sort of the degree of variation that we've incorporated into this particular plan. But those broader conversations are happening with the applicant, who is also on the call this evening and is hearing all these comments that the committee is providing.
And I recognize that in Council's question, there's maybe opportunity for staff to comment further. Seeing none at this point. Councillor Hill, do you have another question? Okay. Councillor Sanik.
Thank you. Since we are talking about how all these houses are going to be like so close together, Mr. Leclerc, of the 261 lots, how many lots are going to be able to have a street tree on them?
Through Mr. Chair, the subdivision standard, the subdivision guideline standard, as I understand it, and I stand to be corrected by staff, this is something that our engineers generally deal with rather than we do. is that there has to be one tree for every single detached property, one tree for every semi-detached property, and one tree for every three townhouse properties. That's the city's standard for subdivision development. In this instance, there's the opportunity for more along the flankages of, I believe corner lots are also required to have a number of trees along the side. I don't know the number offhand. And there are opportunities for additional plantings around sort of the flankage of the park, particularly, which is going to be in the center of the neighborhood.
Okay. And so, thank you. And so therefore, for those flankages, right, you will be putting trees there? Like you will be putting trees there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's required by the subdivision design contract.
I see. Okay.
So yes, absolutely.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
and yeah, what you were saying is that right now the demand is for townhouses, and that's probably because our housing prices, like the average price of a house is so expensive. Townhomes are the most affordable, but definitely not affordable like they used to be in the 200,000s. Now it's like ridiculous. But I was sitting on this planning committee for all the phases of Woodhaven. And I remember being on this planning committee where it was one of the blocks, Maria Street or something. It was supposed to be townhouses, and Fotan came and they said, the demand for townhouses is just not there. We want to change the density, down from medium down to low density, have single detached homes. And look how we are 10 years later, tides have totally changed. So I know that there is a big demand for townhomes just because that's all anyone can afford right now. It's just that my big concern is to have enough parking, for the tradespeople, for visitors. And I think that's the way that we just showed those red areas on page 11 in the traffic report. We have to have more places, more parking spots on the street than where cars can actually park. Thank you.
Appreciate those comments through you, Mr. Chair.
Very good, thank you. So last call for committee. Okay, seeing none, I understand that we may have missed a potential member of the public at the beginning, and recognizing that we're on Zoom and things happen technologically and hands up and hands down can't always be seen. I'm willing to go to the clerk for that individual if they're still here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I have Kavita Ball to speak to the committee.
Please do with your full name and address, please.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So
my name is Kavita.
Please, and you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Kavita Bal, and I'm living in the Woodhaven division. I think it's the phase 4, and the address is 1505 Shira Drive. So I know Mr. Fontaine was telling that how the townhouse are in demand. So I just want to comment on, it seems to me that this demand is like being created, because just less than 1 year ago, you could get a detached house for the same price. And now the townhouse it's even more, the price is higher than it used to be for a detached less than a year ago. And I know everything is being inflated by COVID, but is it actually inflated by COVID, or is it something which is being created? Is the inflation being created? And are there any studies being done on that? Because I do wonder about the beautification of your city as well, right? So just having like a cookie cutter houses, townhouses, 261 houses, no variety. Does that sound, or does that, like, if you imagine that, does that look okay to everybody?
Okay, Ms. Ball, we don't allow for an exchange back and forth. So if you did have any additional, ask them now, and the planner can respond, but it won't be a conversation. But you still have 2 or 3 minutes left, so please take.
No, that was my only concern.
Okay, thank you. We'll have Mr. Leclerc respond.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would just think the question about pricing and home prices is certainly something that I'm not qualified to speak to. I'm not an economist. What I can say anecdotally is that it's something that we're seeing everywhere. The province there was a report issued by the province, I believe earlier this week or last week, on housing affordability, a task force, sort of a result of the task force based on what we've seen over the past, say, 2 years in terms of housing prices. So people are looking at it, but I'm not qualified to speak to the causes for that. That was the only question that I had noted, but certainly if there's any that I missed, I'm happy to speak to those.
Fair enough. No, I think that was a direct response. Alrighty. So with that, during this public meeting, we will thank everyone who participated both in this and all three. It's excellent to have that type of feedback, and a reminder process-wise that staff will now continue to work on these files, put them under technical review, and if any members of the public wish to further comment or have their voice heard on them, they can email the clerk who's been here with us tonight, and also Mr. Park, and that can be part of the official process. And then we'll get a recommendation back to this committee to decide, which will then go to City Council for the final decision. Alrighty, so thanks everyone, and we'll move into our meeting of the Planning Committee. So we'll call it to order officially. The time is 8:46. I'll look for and seconder for approval of the agenda. Councillor Hill. Oh, as amended.
With the addendum, yeah.
With the addendum. I always forget. Yes, with the addendum, which has additional correspondence. So we have a mover for the agenda as amended. Seconder, Councillor Sanik. All those in favor? Alrighty. And we'll have a mover and seconder for confirmation of the minutes that were from February 3rd. Councillor Neal, Councillor Sanik, all those in favor? That passes. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We also have no delegations or briefings. No business, no motions. Are there any notices of motions? Is there any other business? Seeing none, there's noted correspondence here on the agenda, and as the Vice Chair pointed out, the addeds are now included, and they were mainly, actually exclusively, additional correspondence. So the date of our next meeting is March 3rd. I hope that everyone has a nice family day long weekend, and stay safe if you're out on the roads, and peaceful, because it's been an interesting time. So thanks for a great meeting tonight with no raucousness here. I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Neal, Councillor Sanik, all those in favor? Perfect. Have a great night, everyone. Take care.